Greetings, Renette. This is your critique for Project 1, and we'll do Project 2 here as well. Looking at the aperture in Project 1, looking at self-portrait. This image here jumps out to me. And I look at it, and I like the layering of it. I see these trees, and I see your face, and I see these leaves in the background. The interesting thing is that the focus is on the leaves as opposed to the face. Just leaves me with a lot of questions, and I don't know if they're necessarily bad questions. And it causes tension in the viewer, or causes tension in me anyways, as I struggle to look at you, the portrait. And you know, we're humans, we see humans in a picture, and we immediately think they're the most important thing almost all the time. So we want to see that sharp, but I don't get that here, and then I'm forced to look at what is sharp, which is the leaves in the background. So that push and pull causes me as a viewer tension, and I think it can create a message. I think a lot of people would look at it as, oh, the picture's out of focus, I want to look at the person, and so like in that sense, technically, it would be incorrect. But if what you're trying to do is to create this tension and put the emphasis on the environment as opposed to the figure, I would say to a degree you're successful. And like I said, I do kind of like the composition, I like the layering. I would be curious to see what this image looked like if the focus were on your face, or if the images were on the sticks in the front and everything behind it was out of focus, including your face and the leaves. That might be interesting too. So I have a lot of questions. It's not necessarily good or bad about the image, but those are some thoughts about that one. This image I unequivocally like a lot. I almost think it is a great photograph. I like the grayscale, I like the abstractness. It's just such an odd shadow that you've created, and the shoes took me a while to figure out that they're shoes. At first, it just kind of looked, they're so close in value to the grass, I kind of read them just as grass. But I like this line coming through. I really like the shadow. It looks to me like a lizard or some sort of animal. I keep trying to, transform it into that. So this is an image I can look at a lot, and I appreciate for a lot of different reasons, like the textures, and as I said, the abstraction and the composition. And I do think that it is interesting that we eventually come to see it is a shadow of a figure, of a person, and what helps us obviously is the shoes. If the shoes were here, I don't know that I would ever come to that. So I like that the shoes are there, and I also like the shoes are sort of hidden in the photograph. I think it's a very effective image, and I enjoy it a lot. I also kind of like this image, though, I almost want the focus on the door as opposed to you reflected in the mirror. Again, this is a lot like that first image we looked at, where you have a selection of focus and some parts in focus and out of focus. And I don't know that there's, again, a right answer in this. What I do really like about this, again, is the composition. I like all the lines, these hard vertical lines here, and how it's just broken up a little bit with your figure. The one thing I think that could be better in this image is getting the all the lines vertical. And I think we have a number of obstacles in that. I think we just need to, really pay attention to, the frame, because it's funny. This side here looks like it's actually fairly squared up with the frame. And then this side isn't, which tells me the camera might be angled maybe just up a little bit or skewed a little bit or something like that, or it wasn't centered on the door. Then so there's a slight angling of the camera, and an angling right and upward is kind of my feeling. So I would like to get that, because I find that a little bit distracting. Like this side, like I said, this side's fine, but this side, see this little bit here. Something we could go into Photoshop and actually skew it, affect the image and skew it and just pull it down. We can kind of correct for perspective and things like that in Photoshop. So we might even be able to be able to manipulate it in some post-processing software. to get what I want. But I really like it when when lines are squared up 90 degrees, you know, perpendicular, parallel. I think it just gives a crispness and it shows an attention to detail. And this one's just off just that little bit. I really like the structure of the photograph. The other thing that I think we're struggling with just a little bit, I'm going to guess this is a wider angle lens. Yeah, let's see. 55, not really. That's more normal and actually almost zoomed lens. What I was seeing here is just this little bit. See how this line here seems just to bulge out just a little bit. Particularly up here, the distance is greater. It feels like we're getting some warping of it through the lens. And the lens does warp the light and warp the image. So that can happen and be an artifact lens. So I think that's what we've got. Just a little bit there, but I'm surprised it's a 55. So maybe something else is going on. Okay, anyways, yeah, just tiny little details. I like the photograph. I like the composition. Again, it's another one I'd like to see how it changed if we focused on here instead of here. I'd be curious to see how that affected it. It might be positive, might be negative. But I do like the photograph. Just some minor tweaking and maybe a little further exploration. I like this quite a bit. I really like reflections. I think you know, mirrors, windows, water, anything that reflects, and particularly things that reflect and transparent like windows and water, I think can be a lot of fun to play with the space. So I appreciate this composition. I appreciate the reflection, and I also like that we're seeing the reflection and we're seeing transparency through it. It just creates this really weird space in a photograph, and I appreciate it. I'm trying to decide if I want to crop this a little bit more. I don't really know that I need to, but I don't know, like this up here, and maybe it's just fine. I don't know, just thinking out loud. But okay, but I like how the reflection, I like how your hair and the trees have a very similar sort of texture and shape to them, and they flow really well together. And then I like how your expression is looking off this way. I think it's a well constructed photograph. So I think that's the last one for Project 1. So since I'm here, I will also look at your Project 2, and we'll start that critique process off here. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to get you your critique last week, so we'll make sure you're the first to get your critique this week. Alright, so looking at Project 2. And this one is all about shutter speed, which is about time, and you know, affects the image in very different ways than aperture. So, looking at these images, I'm just going to scroll through them since they're all similar in composition. We just have different shutter speeds. And of these 4 images, the one I am most engaged with is this one. I like the blur. I always like playing with slow shutter speeds and getting that little bit of blur. I like that sharp, soft relationship that we can get with photographs. So, you know, out here we have the sharpness, and here we have this movement, and then here we have this movement. We also have some reflection there, so as I was just talking about the previous portfolio, I appreciate that and enjoy that. Again, I think we could just square things up a little bit. See how there's a little less space here than down here, and the same thing happens here, so your camera is probably angling up just a little bit. It might be better if we shoot this dead on and get these lines perfectly perpendicular. You know, little details like that I think could make the image better. Alright, so we're looking at this. Let's we'll go through these. I think there's a relationship between these 4 or 5 photographs. Alright, so one thing I notice with many of them, it seems they're slightly overexposed. The exposure is spot on with this image here. So, you know, f7.1 at 1/200ths of a second. So f8 at 1/250ths of a second. Or no, f8 at 1, whatever. Okay, so I like the composition. I like all the negative space. the exposure is spot on, but I actually kind of like this one a little bit more, and maybe even this one. Though this is, I would say, slightly overexposed. Not too bad. We just lose a little bit of texture here on the jeans, maybe just a little bit here. And I'm actually less concerned with it out here because I kind of like the lines that the slower shutter speed creates. This is probably like, what, 60th second. Wow. So the swing exaggerates that quite a bit. So interesting use of panning. Following that subject, but also you're probably just able to sit there and swing, so it's good. I also like compositionally, again, I think you're creating strong compositions with that. I like these shapes here, and I like how the legs, you know, are a slightly different angle, and then all lines out here. This image, I think, again, like I said earlier, is slightly overexposed, but I don't think it suffers really too much. We could technically you know, try and reclaim some of this information if we took this photograph into something like Camera Raw, which is a little bit different than Photoshop and allows us to sometimes recover information that's blown out, or actually for the information that's dark too. But I think I like this one actually both in color and in black and white, so it works both ways. This image, I would say, is both of these. This is definitively overexposed when I look at it. Though again, I like the composition, and I like the action, and I like the movement. I like these shapes that are popping up here. But this one, I would say, is definitively overexposed, and it's negatively impacting the image. We're losing all the saturation, blowing out highlights, feels soft, feels flat in contrast, and I really want to, you know, push it, play with it, or retake it, and that's the hard thing when we're doing panning, is you need these longer exposures. Well, 60th isn't terribly long, so it's almost best to do panning, you know, low light, early morning when the sun's just coming up, or when the sun's just setting, or you know, some other time where you can create a lower light situation. Though if your subject's moving really fast, like when you're on the swing, you can get away with higher shutter speeds. You actually just needed a smaller aperture, and I think you would have gotten the image that would have been technically better. This image, I think, you know, again, we're panning, and I actually like the feet images better. This one's actually a little more technically what panning is, where the camera is trying to follow the subject. The other ones are panning too, but you're kind of just holding it, and the camera moves with you, and you are the subject. So you get that effective panning, but it's a slightly easier skill. But same effect. I don't know. It's good. The other images are good. I actually like them better than this one. So, all right. We'll move along. Let's see what we got here. Painting with light. Okay. So now I'm assuming we have 10 full seconds. And, ooh, I like it better in grayscale. Just that contrast adds more drama to it. And I can actually see you kind of just playing with the light here better here. Here it's just it's not like overexposed. Like technically it's probably a decent exposure, but I would say that expressively it's overexposed, and we get to this point with exposure in a camera where we can kind of make choices, choose how we want to expose images, because, you know, sometimes there are multiple answers as to the correct exposure, and then you have to think, how do I want it expressively? I like this one where we have this higher contrast, deeper, darker shadows, and I can really see how you selectively, you know, painted with the light on the floor. You know, and again, I'm obsessing about this, but I really like it when I have like these horizontal lines. I want them straight across. I just kind of bothered that they're at this angle, which I don't know, maybe it's fine. So, okay. Anyways, Ren. There are some thoughts on your Project 1 and your Project 2. Keep going and let me know what questions you may have.